Welcome back, everybody. It is finally good old Thursday here on the Catholic Convert Show. And guess what? We're bringing with all of our collective experience, mostly Ed's, because, he was around the time that dating was invented. We're going to talk about the Catholic dating world today because, listen, I'm never going to be a matchmaker. I'm never going to be a, let me set you up with so-and-so, because honestly, that's none of my business. But I have had a lot of people, asking me questions about, hey, where do I go to find a good Catholic woman? Well, a Catholic church is a great place to start. But all that said, you do find a lot of people that are complaining online about relationships and how hard it is to find a good woman. Obviously, the RNC is not the place you need to go looking. Well, unless you're into that sort of thing, but chances are she's not a good Catholic girl. And listen, I haven't dated in 20 years, over 20 years now, unless you count dating my wife. But I don't have to go looking for her unless she's behind the counter because she's only 4'11". But listen, there's one thing that I noticed, because I've got some Mormon friends. One thing that I've noticed they do right is in their churches, they have the families, married men and women and kids, all sitting in one section. And then the other section is completely dedicated for single people. If you're not in a relationship, you're not dating, you're not married, you go sit in those pews with all the other single people. And I think that's awesome. I think it's a great way to, hey, get some conversation going, at the coffee and donuts thing after Mass. I don't know why we don't do that. At my church, we've got it's mostly families, really. And every now and then you see a couple of young people on this side over on the transept by our St. Joseph altar. And then you see some more people, young people, possibly single, they appear to be, over here on the transept of where our Marian altar is. And I'm like, they always sit in the same spot. Now, I get it. I'm a stickler for always sitting in the same pew. This is my spot now. I walked into this church a little over a year ago and said, this is my spot now. I'm not going anywhere. Other people used to sit here, but the key word in that is used to. But when you're single and you see other single people, maybe you should try to go sit next to them. And no, I'm not saying that, the Mass should be a pickup spot. It's not the bar at 2 a.m. when you're like, all right, I'm running out of options. Let me go find that dependopotamus over there. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, you get to know people, you spend some time in at least close proximity with them. And maybe after Mass, as you're leaving the pews, after you've given your prayer of thanksgiving, following the exit procession from the Mass, hi, I'm Jim, or, whatever, and speak to people. But, there is something to say. We do live in this weird society where it's a lot of socially inept, broken people that are chasing after socially inept, broken people. And every time I look over at my wife or I glance down at my wedding band, sometimes I feel like I caught the last chopper out of Nam when I see how much of a mess the dating world is. Right. One of my close friends, I've mentioned him before. His name's Adam Lane Smith. He's an attachment specialist. He's got all the certifications and degrees and all that other, when he was a family therapist for a long time. But right now he's mostly specializing in attachment theory and relationships. And some of the horror stories that he's told me, I'm like, you know what? There's no way I could do what you do and listen to these stories from both men and women, and not drink all the time. There's no way. You've got people that'll call in or that'll contact him and they say things like, and I'm not violating HIPAA and neither is he, because he's no longer a licensed therapist. He's given up his license so he can do coaching, which is a lot more lucrative, and he can go international with it. But he told stories about, someone messages him and says, I caught my boyfriend cheating with my mom, so I cheated on him with his brother, and now we're both facing child endangerment charges. Should we postpone our wedding until after we're sentenced? And I wish that was an exaggeration, but it's not. Those are some of the things that he gets. So here's a question. And Ed, you know what? You're probably around more people than I am because you're like an outgoing guy, and you talk to more single people that are in your. I am outgoing. I just don't have time. I've got a lot of clients and big family to take care of. But you're at CCD, you're at RCIA, you're at your Bible studies, you're all of these things. And I'm willing to bet you've talked to plenty of single Catholics, both men and women, that have at some point said, it's really hard to meet single people because everyone's insane. So here's my thing. I want to know your perspective on, and obviously you're not dating. You're not looking for dates. But for those people who are and the experiences that you've had with them, how do you go about talking to these people and saying, listen, here's the advice that you actually need versus the random weird put up a Tinder profile and hope you get lucky?
Yeah, it's a good one. You mentioned all the, I have a lot of exposure to perhaps single people. Yeah, I do. Except the CCD kids are 13, so they're usually not looking. And with my Bible studies, there are single people there, but it's usually because they are 97-year-old widows or widowers. So it's a little bit of a different story. But occasionally you get the 35, 40-year-old who just happens to be that age and be single that shows up for the Bible study. Not that they come to a Bible study looking to find love, but they keep their um, but it's tough because we were talking before the episode, and you were saying about, well, if you're Catholic, how do you find another Catholic to date? And it goes beyond that, though. At least in my mind, it would, because yeah, you can find a Catholic out there. I'm sure it's the same for any faith that you're following. But what you really want is you want a good Catholic. You want a practicing Catholic. You want a Catholic who actually believes what follows the teachings of the church as you most likely are. And that's where it gets tricky, because then the pool of possibilities gets very, very shallow. And so that's where the issue is. And that's why I like, there's a few of them around here. There's parishes that will have kind of that will have singles organizations within the parish, and they will have either something where they get together for cake and coffee or wine and cheese on a monthly basis or a weekly basis, or they'll sponsor different activities, like they'll go rafting down one of the local rivers, or a camping trip or something like that. And I think those are a really good way to meet somebody, because if you're going to show up to one of those, you're going to show up because of what I just said. You're looking for not only a partner, you're looking for a Catholic partner, and you're looking for a good practicing Catholic partner. So I think more parishes really need to get on board with that sort of thing. I've tried. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't be partaking in it, but I've tried getting something like that going at the larger parishes that I hang out in, and I don't know. I just don't. I don't get a lot of support for it, and I don't know why. Because I actually do. I also mentioned while we were talking earlier, I know about, offhand, I can think of 3 couples, people who actually met through church. And one of them, a very good friend of mine, his name is Jason. He actually met his now wife because the two of them were in one of my Bible studies. And so you can't start out in a more wholesome way. They happen to be at the same table for the discussion portion. And so their first conversations were about, you know, Matthew chapter 7 and things like that. So you can't start things off much better than that. And then they wound up
How romantic.
going out for coffee after. It is. It can be. It really can, because then you're like, well, hey, let's grab a coffee after this and talk about this further, or whatever. And then the conversation turns a bit more personal. And the next time after class, instead of going for coffee, you're going for an adult beverage and something like that. But it does happen. But I tell you what, it has got to be difficult if you are a young adult and you're looking for someone who's going to not only be Catholic, but to share the same Catholic values that you do. I don't know. It's got to be tough because, like I said, even if you find someone who says they're Catholic, typically to them, that means they show up at Christmas and Easter, but they disagree with what the church teaches. So if you're looking to find a good Catholic, but I also, what is another great thing? And I remember I noticed this when I was like in my teens and I used to go on these things, is different. So again, I wasn't looking at the time, but pilgrimages, you can actually meet like-minded individuals and perhaps, you know what I mean? They're great. A lot of them happen through the summer. There'll be a anywhere from 2 to 5 day kind of event. And again, the same thing. You wind up just talking to someone. You're not using the same lines you would use at that bar at 2 a.m. But you're going to have real, genuine conversations. And through those conversations, you may actually find something. So I think, it might sound crazy coming when you hear me saying it, but pilgrimages and other events that are held through the church. A lot of times they'll do like a 4-day event at your church. They'll have a speaker that comes in, he talks for 4 consecutive nights or something like that. Or again, it's something as simple as a Bible study, something like that. Or if you're becoming Catholic, like you mentioned earlier, the RCIA program. Who knows? You could be sitting next to a potential spouse when you're in your RCIA program. So it can be done, but man, I'll tell you what. Like I said, it's tough. It is tough.
It has to be, right? Like I see so many young people and young men, most of them online, but there's still several in my circle, and there's guys that are older than me that they've dedicated so much time to. Like I do have a good friend. He's single, and he's expressed to me that it's really hard to find someone because I don't think he's like 42, right? So he's just a few years older than me, and he doesn't have any kids, but it's hard for him because one, he's very consumed with his time with work because he does work in one of those jobs that requires a lot of his time, and on top of that, he holds a position at our parish that also requires a lot of his time. And so that doesn't leave a lot for, without him being exhausted to go and socialize and, meet people, even if it's not meeting a Catholic, so to speak, but someone who is a Christian or maybe even just exploring converting to Catholicism. It's pretty difficult. And like you said, you've got CCD, you've got RCIA, you've got these Bible studies. But if it's anything like mine, that like at my parish, you go to the Bible studies and there's one demographic of dudes there. That's it. Not even dudes and chicks. It's a one demographic of dudes, and they're all 65 to 165. People that you grew up with. And that's it. We have now the Latin Mass community at my church. They do a potluck every first Sunday of the month. So right after Mass, right before Mass, everybody's taking their dishes and dropping them off in the kitchen area for the private school at our parish. And then right after, they go over there and tables are all set up and they have a big potluck and people get to know each other and stuff like that's awesome. But a lot of the time, what I've most seen, and this is kind of what I've resigned myself to, um, most of my kids are not even ready to do any of that marrying stuff yet. But what I have been doing is I'm looking around at a bunch of these parents because I don't plan on going to any other parish. I plan on having my
Mhm.
funeral in 60 years at the parish I'm at now. And I'm looking around at all these other parents with children. I'm like, I wonder if their daughter could marry my son in about 15 years. And picking from that pot, because I'm like, okay, I know these
Yeah.
people. We get along. We got same kind of values. And I'm looking going, yep, I'm going to have to resort to the old medieval paying a bride price to get my son married off kind of thing with some people. Because it's way
Gotcha.
easier
Yeah.
for Catholics to find other Catholics in a Catholic community. But like I said, it's kind of a crapshoot, and it's difficult. And these,
Yeah.
the online dating thing is weird to me. Like the dating apps, that's so weird. Like, I mean, what? I don't know. It just feels weird. I don't even know how to describe it, but I hear so many people say, "Oh, I matched with 7 people and I went on 7 dates and they were all weirdos." I'm like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
okay, well, they could have all been weirdos, or
Of
you could have been the
course.
weirdo." You know, I don't know, but that
Yeah.
seems so weird because I think back to me meeting my wife. She was new in town. Her phone was broken. She had one of those chirp
Oh
to
boy.
text, those chirp walkie-talkie Nextel phones. Remember those? The yellow and black construction colored ones. She had one of those. It was broke.
Uh-huh.
And she just showed up at my mom's church, even though she was Catholic. There wasn't a Catholic church in our immediate area. She just showed up there. And
Mhm.
my mom had met her a couple of times. And she's like, "Oh, my son probably knows where one is. He's always out on that side of town." And again, I was still in the military. And, I was there visiting with
Mm.
family. So she introduced us. I'm like, "Yeah, I know a spot." Now, don't get me wrong. I'm like, my wife was hot when we first met, right? And she's hot now. But here I am, total Riz machine, just shy of 19-year-old, and this 24-year-old woman. I'm like, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to shoot my shot." And so I did. I was like, "Yeah, I'll give you a ride out there to the cell phone store." Now, I knew the cell phone store was closed, but we went out all the way to that end of town anyway.
Oh boy.
Got there. Darn it, it's closed.
Mhm.
But while we're out here, you want to get a bite to eat? Sure. And boom.
Mhm.
That's how I, got in there. And hey, like I said, just shy of 19, picking up a 24-year-old. We've been together for 20 years now. I was a Riz machine, cocky and full of myself, still in the military. And it worked. But
You're
it,
smooth.
it was it was it was semi-organic meeting, right? But when you listen to people talk about now,
Yeah.
"Oh, I go to my church and there's no single people there." Or I go to my church and there's like one single dude there, but he smells like grapefruit all the time. Or, hey, there's that one chick, but I don't know who she's looking at because she's got 3 lazy eyes. And I'm not trying to be mean, but there's some people that just aren't going to click anyway, even if they're both a
Yeah.
single man and a single woman. So, like I said, I can't imagine how hard it is for them. But I do hear so many people talking about, "I just want to find a good Catholic girl, a good Catholic guy, get married, settle down, have 14 kids for the kingdom because Deus Vult, and let's do this." It's so hard. And like I said, your communities and your churches are very limited to a specific group of people. It's not like you get a chance to meet new people in your church every Sunday unless people are just passing through or visiting. So it's got to be super
Mhm.
difficult, especially when you have that goal of, "I'm a Catholic. I want to meet a Catholic girl and marry a Catholic girl, or vice versa. I want to meet a Catholic guy and marry that Catholic guy. And I'm not going to compromise on whether or not they're Catholic, because you really shouldn't have to, because
Mhm.
I know there are exceptions to the rule, but primarily relationships of two separate faiths rarely work out because there's a confliction of values there. Again, I know I'm one of the exceptions, but it's very rare that works out.
Yeah.
And so,
Hey,
like, what do you think we should do, man? Like, should we start maybe we could do it on this show? You know, we could be like, all right, you're going to chime in by city, state, and zip code if you're single and Catholic, and we're going to start putting blasts out for people to get a hold of you.
that's not a bad idea. I'd be up for that. Because the other problem is like, if you want to meet someone through your church, um, back in the day when I would have been of the appropriate age, you still had 50-60% of Catholics who attend mass on a weekly basis. And now, I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of churches around here. It's attendance is somewhere 10 to 15%. So, it's not even that all the Catholics in your area are going to a church that you can run into them there, and they're certainly not going to the Bible studies or the guest speakers they have come in or things like that. So even if there are Catholics in your area, the likelihood of you running into them are slim, which is a shame because I always forget the number. Isn't it 60 million plus Catholics in the country? So you would think out of that
It's
many,
like 72 million, I think, was the last
72
number
million.
reflected. It's a
But
lot,
then you should.
but
It's a lot.
listen, but that number doesn't indicate all of them attending weekly mass. Those are
Well,
literally
that's the
just
problem.
numbers pulled
That,
from baptismal or confirmation records.
yeah, exactly. So that's a problem. So that's why like I said, I go back to what I said earlier. I think that churches really need, especially if they want to change those numbers and get more people attending mass. What's the best way to do that is by creating Catholic families. So if churches would focus more on putting together Catholics via these different kind of organizations and clubs and things like that, it's going to benefit them in the long run. I tried a, a few years back. We had a building on our campus there at church that used to be a convent, but there had been no sisters living there for a number of years. So they had changed it into, they call it the Evangelization Center now. And they broke the different floors up. The Knights of Columbus have a floor there. There's one floor just used for meeting rooms and things like that. But there was this one room that was not being used. It was perfect. Two of the four walls were just windows looking out onto the campus. And the priest who was the pastor at the time said, "Hey, you've been talking about starting a coffee house here. This room is yours. Do with it as you will." And then a couple of days later, the business administrator from our parish called me and said, "No, that's not going to happen," because
I gotta
she
say, that
saw it
sounds a little
as
too
money
Protestant.
going out, but nothing coming in. No, but I mean, but again, it was just going to be a place where people could go after church, after mass on Sundays and Saturday nights, and just be with like-minded people. There would be part of it would be, there'd be big, nice, big, fluffy chairs there. There'd be a basically Catholic library section there. Basically a couple of walls would have nice little books that you could read. There'd be some nice music playing. There'd be coffee and things like that available. So you get together for conversation and stuff. Maybe there's a TV on the wall. I don't know, whatever. But it was just gonna be a nice place for people to be able to hang out with, again, like-minded individuals. But they, like I said, the business administrator for the parish just saw it as a waste of money. So it never
Well,
happened.
listen, it
But even though
also,
I said I was,
the other thing about that is, like, if you want to try to organize some like single Catholic events, right, for single people
Mhm.
at the church or at some kind of venue or whatever, like, hey, we're going to do a dinner, and it's going to be catered. It's specifically for the single people to mingle and whatever. Well, then chances are you got to figure at least 70% who see it won't go.
Yeah.
And then the 30% who do will go. It's going to create this kind of a scenario that reminds you of like middle school and high school dances. You've got like 5 girls on one side of the room, 3.5 guys on the other side of the room. Don't ask me how I got the half. And they're just kind of like awkwardly talking to each other and glancing across. It's like that awkward Footloose moment when nobody wanted to dance with each other.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, or what was that? What was that one movie with the religious sisters had the? It was like an all-girl school ran by religious sisters where they were working. Had a dance. Oh, Fire with Fire, where they had that dance with the boys in the prison camp. That's a great movie. You know,
Sounds
and
like
they're
a
just kind
classic.
of like, yeah, I think it was like 1987 or something. I think came out, but they're staring across the gymnasium to each other. And of course, the sister comes out there. It's like, hey, I need 1.5 foot of daylight between you two when people finally do start dancing. But I think there's a lot more to it than just let's put people together, because we absolutely do need to make more Catholic families. And that's one thing I love about my parish is I've been going every single week, sometimes more than once a week since May of last year. And I don't think there's a single week that goes by where I don't see someone else finally starting to show that they're pregnant and they've already got like 3 or 4 kids. It's like, oh yeah, we're expanding the kingdom, baby. And I see that. But then there's still that weird social media kind of mentality or text culture where, it's like my own kids for a little while struggled with talking to other humans with their voices rather than texting. It's like you're in the same room with each other, but they text each other. Like, if you don't put those phones down, I'm going to run them over with the car. Speak, talk to each other. Or, there's a whole generation of people that are uncomfortable having phone call conversations. I'd rather text. I feel more comfortable. It's perpetuating the issue because we have a lot of people that are of that generation and in that age, but still fit the single Catholic demographic that want to find someone and meet, but they're also weirdly inept at social interaction with other humans rather than through a screen. And then, okay, let's say they did meet online, and then they got to go meet in person, and they just sat there staring at their phones with each other. That awkward middle schooler moment. It's weird, man. But like I said, I know it's got to be hard for anybody who's watching this. I really want, if you have some input, or ideas, comment them, post them in the comments below this video. I don't care if you're on X watching us stream it live or if you're on YouTube, because it's fascinating to me. It's an issue that I personally haven't had to deal with, but I see so many people, whether they're in my social circle in real life or whether they're in my social circle online, that are single Catholics. And they're like, I don't know how to find other Catholic women that are actually Catholic and not, Biden Catholic, the Catholic in name only, or I went to Catholic school to 3rd grade. Not that kind of Catholic, but I'm there in the pew and every Sunday. I'm going to adoration. I'm attending all holy days of obligation. Those, not cafeteria Catholics, not Biden Catholics, but good practicing Catholics. And they're like, I don't know how to meet them. And the option isn't, well, let's turn mass into a dating hall, because that's no. You shouldn't be like, well, consecration of gifts is going on. You're not leaning over and whispering, hey, what are you doing after this? Don't do that, obviously. But it's got to be so hard. And I can't think of an actual solution for these people other than start traveling the country. And when you find a place with a lot of Catholic single women, just relocate your entire life there and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of parishes that are have a younger demographic and also are much more active than some others. I mean, I live in an area where the vast majority of Catholic churches, the average age is 78 and a half, and the place is 3/4 empty most times. So obviously you're not going to run into anybody there. But I do hear these anecdotal stories about parishes in the Wichita diocese and the Lincoln, Nebraska diocese, and down around your way that just because of the way things worked out and the way populations shift and stuff, that do have a younger, more active um, population. So maybe that's the thing. Maybe there's something to that. I would say it was worthwhile to move to an area where you could go to a very active, younger parish. I mean, you're talking about the rest of your life, you know? So I
Right.
think
But then
it's worthwhile.
obviously you have to acknowledge that there's going to be difficulties with that.
Of course.
Excuse me. One, housing is
Yeah.
outrageously priced. I'm
Mhm.
never moving because I enjoy an $800 a month house payment. I am never moving ever. I am locked into this forever. And I look over at apartments that are smaller than my house and they're like, oh, it's $2,700 a month. You're insane. I'm
Oh, it's
sticking with
great.
where I'm at, you know. And then people have jobs. Well, I want to relocate to another job. Well, it's not there, you know. So it's hard, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, if someone has
It is.
solutions, ideas, or just some insight into this whole thing, I would love to read your comments and even maybe address them further on another episode of the show because, I might even pull one of you on if you've experienced this or if you have a solution. I might even pull one of you guys onto the show for one of these episodes as a guest to talk about it.
Bring them in.
Because, yeah, I'll bring them in. Because, listen, it's got to be freaking
Yep.
hard. And, all my married friends all say the same thing that I do. It's, man, I'm so glad I'm already married because I see my sons and I see my daughters and my nieces and nephews trying to navigate
Mm.
the dating world, even if they're not Catholic. And it's like walking through a minefield, except
Oh, yeah.
you're looking, except you're not even trying to dodge the mines. They're all mines. You're just trying to see which one blows up the least. Maybe I don't
Exactly.
lose a knee, I just lose a toe.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's got to be friggin' difficult.
I don't know. Tough world out there. Getting tougher.
It's getting tougher, man. And that's why I'm like, the only solution I can think of is for my children and the parents of other people's children. Hey, start looking at all of the other people in your parish and be like, yo, your daughter and my son should hang out, you know, supervised, of
Yeah,
course, but they
of
should
course.
meet.
Yeah. One
They're
of my
3
buddies from
years
my men's
old.
group, he's done that. 3. Well,
They're 3. Well,
you
let's
might
start
want to be
setting
a
up
little bit
weekly. No, no, nope, nope, nope. We're gonna start setting up play
play
dates and
dates.
foster that. Yeah, and we're gonna foster that connection
Uh,
for the next 15 and 16 years, right?
I think
Or,
it could
or,
work.
or I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just go back to arranged marriages. Give the priest a list of all the single people and be like, "All right, I'm calling your names. I'm gonna draw numbers from the female number list and the male number list, and at the end of the week, you're gonna go through pre-Cana, and then you're gonna get married."
I I think that would go over very well. Be very popular.
That'll work. Be very, very popular. Oh,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
it's got to be a nightmare. I mean, it. Listen, it's. I don't see how people do it if they're in a. I don't understand how my wife tolerated me for as long as she did. Me not being Christian at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And looking back now, obviously my values have shifted and evolved and changed, and my entire perspective on the world has shifted to be viewed through a Catholic lens. So I couldn't even imagine wanting to get into a relationship with someone who wasn't Catholic if I was
Yeah.
single. It's a very important part of who I am. But there's still no solution for what we talked about when it comes to the people who are in their 30s, 40s. Like you've got people who are in their 40s and even 50s who are single.
Absolutely.
And the demographic where they are is other single 55-year-old men.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm in the middle of a little bit of an experiment right now because I just started a new Bible study last Thursday. So I'll be there again tonight. Now, when I walked in, I was very surprised because it was a much larger crowd than we normally have. But there was a very young, very beautiful young lady there. And I could see that once she sat down, it may not have been what she was expecting because she, being probably 24, 25, brought the average age of the room down to 87. So I'm going to be curious to see if she comes back again tonight. That's going to be a very big test. Hopefully, because I don't know, because maybe she took some advice from somebody who said, "Oh, you're looking for a good Catholic guy. Go to a Bible study. Sign up for something like that and see what happens."
She
Maybe
gets
be a
there.
nice young man.
She gets there,
But
and she's like, "Well, if we get married, it'll last 3 years till the funeral if we're lucky."
She's
At
like,
this point, she just got to
well,
find the
that guy's
richest
not
one.
exactly, or the one who's the one who's got the nicest walker. It's tough,
Yeah, right.
but so
Look, I'm looking for
we'll
a
see if
husband, not a patient.
yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see if she comes back. Hopefully she will. Hopefully she got a lot out of last week's class and she'll be back. But I don't know. It's you have to. It's funny. We also, about 2 weeks earlier, I had a conversation with someone at the parish who said that they'd spoken to the pastor and they wanted that person to speak to me about, I don't know why me, but about what kind of events and stuff we could have to attract younger folks to church. And so I rattled off a whole bunch of ideas that I had. And this woman said, "Yeah, but I don't think we have, enough active, interested, excited young folks that would come to those events." And I said, "Yeah, but you said, what kind of events are we going to have to get them to show up?" And she said, "Well, we don't have that kind of a group here yet." And I said, "Okay, but then if we never have those events, we never will have the group." It was this vicious cycle. How do we attract young people? But we don't want to have events that are going to attract young people because we don't have people that are attracted to those sort of things. At some point, you've got to suck it up and you've got to say, well, we're going to have these events. And if three people show up, and hopefully the next time it's 7 people and the next time it's 12 people. You can't attract young folks to what's going on in your church by having nothing for young folks to be attracted to. It just doesn't work that way. So I really think that there has to be an effort put out there to bring young folks in and to encourage them to find people who are also there and to create young Catholic families. We don't have that anymore. I see, even if I see younger folks in church, I see them there by themselves, which is very sad. There'll be the 28-year-old woman who's sitting there by herself over there. There's the 23-year-old man who's sitting over on the other side by himself. And, you don't, actually, how I church jump for various reasons, but the church that I usually attend on Sunday, which is kind of a mid-sized kind of a church, there's these 2 families that I love seeing every Sunday. They both sit in the front, one on one side of the church and one on the other side. But they are both couples are probably in their late 20s or 30s. They both have 3 kids and probably more on the way. And they dress so nicely, even the kids, for Sunday Mass. But that's 2 families in an entire parish. And most churches I go to, I don't see families like that at all. We've got to get back to encouraging that kind of a lifestyle, because the world tells you that that's not the way to live. The world tells you from 16 through 36, you go through as many of the opposite sex as you can. You get a career, you follow that for a while, and then maybe at 40, you marry somebody, but then you don't have kids because that's going to really ruin your career and your body and your everything else. So you've got the world telling you that, but we should have the church telling us quite the opposite. That's something like, what the beautiful family that you've created there. And when you line up in church on a Sunday morning, I'm sure people notice that. But again, it also seems like in your church,
That's one
there's
thing
a
I
lot
did
of
notice about our parish is we have a lot of large families that are always in there. Like
yeah.
there's one particular family that sits a few rows in front of me. You have the grandfather, the grandmother, and then you have one son with his wife and their 3 kids, one on the way. And then on the other side, you've got another son with his wife and their 2 kids, one on the way. And that takes up the entire row.
Yeah.
And then in the row just behind them, it's still in front of me, you've got their daughter with her husband and their 4 kids and one on the way. And it takes up 2 rows, just one family taking up 2 rows, and I see instances of that all over. And I guess we're kind of lucky at my parish too, because we have the private school that parishioners send their kids to. And it's literally on the other side of the grass in front of the front door. That's the school, and it's normal size school building. And it's like K through 8, right? And before they end up going to like St. Joseph's for the high school, but they're all still parishioners. And their families are all parishioners at our church. And so we kind of have this constant pipeline of young people who are coming out of high school and maintaining their attendance at the parish. But obviously a lot of them go off to college, and we have even more that come out of high school and come into the parish. But then they end up seeking, like at least the young men, they seek out vocation. So they end up joining the seminary and things like that. We've got a ton of seminarians coming out of our church. It's awesome. But when you still like, okay, well, that's lowering the pool of availability for single Catholics to get together and create more Catholic families. And so it's, you got to find that, the right balance of it. Like I said, we're lucky. We've got an influx of young people every single year who have been coming to our parish forever and then continue to come to our parish as they're, filing out of the high school, year after year.
Yeah.
But, oh, man, my parish is one of, I don't know, 100,000. There might be 5 out of every 1,000 that are like that. Because when you look at all the rest of them that are having, to either close or, I guess it would be a positive if some of these parishes that are having to merge, because then you meet new people and there's a opportunity there for some single Catholic people to meet. But it's still sad we're closing parishes. What we need is more Catholics attending, and what we need is more Catholics or more people converting to Catholicism and then meeting each other that way. But I feel bad for single people, but I really feel bad for single Catholic people because it's very hard. The dating world's a mess as it is, but the Catholic dating world, gosh, it just seems infinitely smaller as far as the pool. And so you got to feel for these people. But you're right. Finding new ways to get an influx of more young Catholics into the pews, that's definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah. But I just don't see it being done, at least in this area here. And I mean, our Protestant brothers and sisters, at least in this area, and I'm sure it's the same across the country, they're great at doing that. They hold events all the time. I mean, I got a good buddy who's a pastor at it's a church called the Bridge Church. So I'm not sure exactly what their theology would be, what it's closest to, but really great guy. And the Facebook is loaded every Thursday and Friday. It's loaded with what kind of activities they have for the young people on the weekend coming up. So I applaud them for that. And then they get people who are excited about the faith and they're showing up. So it can be done. It certainly can be done. And I don't know why the Catholic Church doesn't take a greater interest in seeing that it's done. It's I always tell people, that the Protestants are great at bringing people together, but the message is lacking. We're in the Catholic faith, we've got the complete message, we've got the fullness of the faith, and yet we're lacking in bringing people in to hear that message. So we've got to do that. We've got to work on that, and it's got to start with the younger folks. So we do have a big around here. They do have a couple of events in our diocese every year for the youth. I guess it's aimed at the I guess like 12 to 18 kind of crowd, and they will have a couple of events a year. Well, they'll bring in a couple of younger, hipper priests to talk, and they'll have some Christian music groups come in, and they'll have activities for the kids, and they get a good crowd. They get it, they'll get several hundred kids to show up from throughout the diocese, but that's kind of where it begins and ends for that. And they do nothing for the like 18 to 30 group, which is where I think we're really, really losing people. Kids go away to college, they come back as atheists or at least agnostics. And that's something we've got to stop the bleeding there. So I don't know what the answer is, though.
People aren't going to like hearing this, but our Protestant brothers and sisters out there, they are absolutely destroying us by capitalizing on the socializing aspect of evangelization in their church activities. They are absolutely killing it. And I say that knowing full well that my parish is pretty much an exception, because sometimes I feel like our bulletin is about as thick as Time magazine with all of the things going on in the church and all of the events that we end up having, inviting new people to all these different talks and congresses and conferences, but it's rare. And so when I say I'm automatically excluding the rare exceptions, because there's going to be some people that turn around and say, well, it's not like that at my parish. We've got this. Okay, then you're the exception. I get it.
Yeah.
But the Protestants are kicking our butts at that. Even though their numbers are shrinking and more people are converting to Catholicism than ever before, they're still kicking our butts on the social aspect of it. Like I can remember when I was in middle school, still attending a Protestant church. We had the youth group, and that was something you just couldn't wait to get in to hang out with all the other young kids. And then we had the young adult group right after that. And part of the young adult group hung out all together and went and did all these, same with the youth group. They all did like these, well, we're going skiing. We're taking a weekend trip to the beach with the entire youth group, or we're doing all of these cool things. We're going to the lake. We're going to this, whatever. And you would get like 50, 60 young people there. And it's always been like that. But there's some things that we do need to adapt with our parish practices in the Catholic Church, while obviously still maintaining everything tradition-wise. But we've definitely got to adapt to this disconnected physically, but connected electronically generation who, man, we're going to run out of people if we don't start building more Catholic families organically. Awkward silence. All right, Ed, what'd you bring for us today, brother?
No awkward silence whatsoever. I brought something pretty cool, I think. I don't know. Of course, I said it every day, and probably bores the skulls off of everybody every day. I don't know.
You set the bar high on Monday, so now all you're trying to do is not drop it.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Well, I brought in some more ephemera, if you will. And this is a letter. Oh, boy, that's going to be tough to see through the glass and such. But this is actually a letter from the apostolic delegations of two towns in Italy, Fermo and Ascoli, if I'm saying that correctly. But you can see on the back where it's been let me see if we can get there. Oh boy, you can see the seal from the Vatican post office and things like that. But this is a letter from, as I mentioned, from the apostolic delegation of these towns. Now, because back in between the Congress of Vienna in 1815 and the capture of Rome in 1870, the papal state was subdivided geographically into 17 apostolic delegations for administrative purposes. And this system was instituted by Pope Pius VII in 1816. And each of these delegations was actually governed by a cardinal. So most of these towns that are mentioned, and in fact, I looked it up, and these two towns of Fermo and Ascoli, there's remnants of, there's the residences of the cardinals that used to run these little areas, and there's many beautiful cathedrals and things like that. But it's just kind of a neat part of our history, because obviously after 1870 we no longer had the papal states, but this is actually dated from 1827. So this was still when the papal states were going strong, 1827. And this is simply a letter from the delegates, the apostolic delegates from these two towns, to the Vatican. And I've been trying to figure out exactly what it says, because it's in Italian, it's not in Latin, but the writing is so small.
Well, they were obviously doctors of the church. But
obviously, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got what you did there. But I'm trying to figure out what they were asking for. But I still think it's really cool that when you have a stamp that gets canceled, so you know that the postage has been paid, and on this one, you can see the stamp from the Vatican there, which is pretty cool that they have their own. And actually, there's also, you can see the remnants of the seal right here, the wax seal, because they would have just folded this paper over, and because this is the address on the front, they would have just folded it and sent it that way. So it's kind of neat.
We really
it's
need to go back to
1827,
wax
so
seals.
It's cool, right? It's all. I mean, that that letter is almost 200 years old, and it's just these dudes saying, "Hey, you guys at the Vatican, things are great here in these little towns, and keep up the good work. Here, tell the Pope we said hey," and that sort of thing. So, again, it's just these little pieces of church history that are held down in my basement and remind me of better times.
Yeah. Like I said, we need to go back to using signet rings to seal letters with wax.
Yeah.
Just to do it. I actually have a letter in my desk here that
From the Pope.
buddy of mine sent me on I believe this
cool.
was, I can't remember what kind of paper he said it was, but nice wax seal. No, it's not vellum.
Yeah.
I think it might be like a more modern derivative of papyrus is what I was thinking. But
yeah.
He sent it in a wax seal, and it was written in Icelandic, so no one else could read it but me, because, in addition to Spanish, I taught myself Icelandic by listening to Icelandic folk music for like 6 years in a row.
Okay.
So I learned at least how to read it, because I was having to read music translations. I learned a decent bit. I'm speaking. Wow. It sucks because I have the pronunciation proclivities for Latin and Spanish, since I spoke Spanish way before I learned Icelandic. But no, it's a whole vibe. But no, letters like that are cool. Like I've said 1,000 times. It's a piece of actual physical history. And it's like when you go to an antique store and you find someone's
Yes.
like World War II love letters that was hidden away in some drawer in the middle of
Yeah,
like this
yeah, yeah.
desk that they were selling. And it's the untold little pieces of history that don't get put in history books that make it more tangible, that make it real. Because I can pick up and be like, yo,
Yeah.
this is Saddam Hussein's toilet seat or whatever. Okay. But a private correspondence between some member of the Republican Guard and his wife or whatever, that's something that would never ever make it into a history book. But it's
True.
really cool 60, 70 years from now. And people look back to, the Desert Storm, the Gulf War, or even the later invasion in 03 and 04. Like,
Mhm.
huh. Yeah, right after Operation Rolling Thunder, and we plowed through the streets of Baghdad with Fourth ID, we came across these letters from this general to his daughters or wife or whatever. And they'd be like, hey, miss you, love
Mm.
you, that kind of stuff. But it's something real and tangible, right? Same thing with World War II
Sure.
letters or World War I letters or some letters that we
Mhm.
find, in museums now from like the Napoleonic Wars,
Mhm.
back when people had a much better vocabulary. You look at some
Yeah.
16-year-old kids' letters from the American Revolution. It's like, my dearest mother, it is with great solace that I am able to correspond with you in these times of strife. And now you've got like a 25-year-old you know, in whatever sending, in Afghanistan, Iraq, back when we were still there, sending an email to his wife is like, dear Marie, it's hot and I'm sweetie. Listen, don't let Gary use my truck. That's like the
It's the same
But
vibe.
no, I'm same vibe, 100%. But no, it's really cool to find these super personal pieces of history, and that's why I like it when you bring stuff like that on the show.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, part of it that I was able to translate from that one, it does start off by saying something like "peace be with you" or something to that effect. I was able to make out the word "peace," so that's in there.
Right. Pache. Got it.
Um,
Thanks.
but Pacha, yeah, exactly. That's in that first line there. So yeah, I gotta get someone of my attention to take a closer look at this thing and get it. I mean, it could be that we're running out of pasta. Send help. I don't know. It could be something like that.
Peace be with you.
What
We
one?
need more
No,
flour. We need more
marinara
heads.
is going short. Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
But I don't know.
But no, it doesn't matter if it's not important. And it's the same as if it was an official
No.
document, right? Because even with
Exactly.
official
Yes.
documents, or like with papal bulls or things like that, they're handwritten. And so there's a bit of that person who wrote it, a bit of that pope who wrote it, or an official correspondence to the pope. There's still a bit of that person
Yeah.
in there, in that ink, on that paper, on that vellum, in that
Yeah.
wax. It's more real than just, oh, we've got these archived copies of all these papal bulls perfectly translated on the Vatican website.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
not the
it's not
same.
the same. It's like I've got this actual piece that was passed hand to hand and it traveled through the dirt and the wind and the humidity and the elements, and it was passed on by various hands. It's something different, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all right.
It's beautiful stuff.
Listen, I'm serious about what I said. If you've got some insights, if you've got some input, some ideas, or maybe you've got some success stories about something you've done at your parish in bringing more single Catholic people together to, you know, expand the kingdom through good old being fruitful in the biblical sense, I want to know about it. Drop them in the comments. And like I said, if you've got a cool success story or or ideas, we might even bring you on to talk about it. But we're
Nice.
out of time. 20 seconds and counting. So I'm going to say thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. And thanks for sharing this with all of your anti Catholic friends. Do that more often. We'll see you.
God bless everybody.